It began with a conversation I never expected to have. We were sitting on the couch, the kids away for the weekend, and I noticed Olivia seemed distant. Her usual warmth had been replaced by something colder, more calculating. She had been quiet all day, only responding in short, clipped phrases, her mind clearly elsewhere. Finally, as I flipped through the channels, she turned to me with that look, the one that always preceded some big revelation. "Jason," she began, her voice steady but tinged with nervous energy. "We need to talk." Instantly, I felt a chill run down my spine. I hated that phrase. Nothing good ever followed those words. "All right," I said, bracing myself, trying to act nonchalant even though my pulse quickened. "I've been thinking about us, our marriage," she continued, her eyes avoiding mine. "You know how much I love you, right?" "Of course," I replied, already sensing where this was going. There was always a but after a statement like that. "But I feel like we're stuck. The kids are grown, we've settled into this routine, and I need something more. I want to experience life beyond this predictability." It hit me like a freight train. Predictability? I thought everything was going fine. Sure, we weren't in the honeymoon phase anymore, but we had built a life together, a good one. We were financially stable, the kids were independent, and we still had our occasional weekends away. So, what was she talking about? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "What are you saying, Olivia?" She hesitated, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I've been talking to Lisa, and well, she suggested something that might help. You know, to shake things up." "Lisa." Of course. Olivia's best friend and the queen of drama. Lisa had been through 3 marriages and was living her life like every day was a party. She was always trying to push Olivia to be more like her, I guess. But Olivia wasn't like Lisa. Or at least, that's what I thought. "And what exactly did Lisa suggest?" I asked, dreading the answer. Olivia finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of anticipation and fear. "An open marriage." I blinked, not sure I had heard her right. "An open marriage?" I repeated slowly, as if saying it out loud would make it less real. "You want to sleep with other people?" "I just want to explore," she said quickly, her words tumbling out. "I've never been with anyone but you, Jason. And I've been thinking, what if I'm missing out on something? I don't want to hurt you, and I love you more than anything. But I need to know if there's more out there." I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a heavy stone. This was my wife, the woman I had loved for over 25 years, telling me she wanted to be with other men. And not just as a fling. She wanted my permission to do it, to keep our marriage intact while she indulged in her curiosity. "Jason?" she asked softly, reaching out to touch my hand. I pulled away, unable to process what she was saying. "So, you want to go out and sleep with other men, but what about me? Am I just supposed to sit here and wait for you to come home after being with someone else?" She shook her head. "No, it wouldn't be like that. You could do it too if you wanted. It would be mutual." I laughed, but it was humorless, hollow. "Mutual? You think this is something we can just agree on, like it's a business deal?" Olivia bit her lip, clearly unsure how to respond. "I know it's a lot to ask. I don't want to look back on my life with regrets. I want to be able to say that I lived fully, that I didn't let fear or societal norms hold me back. And I don't want to lose you. I want us to stay strong, but maybe this could make us even stronger." I stood up, pacing the room. My mind was racing, emotions swirling inside me. Anger, confusion, betrayal. I couldn't believe this was happening. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her how selfish she was being. But another part, a quieter, more rational part, wondered if maybe I could play along. Maybe if I agreed, I could use this situation to my advantage. After all, if she wanted to be with other men, what was stopping me from exploring a few things of my own? The thought of revenge began to take root in my mind. I knew exactly who I could turn to. Her sister, Emily. She had always been flirtatious with me ever since we first met. And Olivia had no idea. If she wanted an open marriage, fine. But I wasn't going to sit on the sidelines while she lived out her fantasies. I was going to make sure that I came out on top. I stopped pacing and turned to face her. "All right," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You want an open marriage? You've got it. But there are going to be rules." Olivia's eyes lit up with cautious hope. "Rules? Like what?" "First," I said, No sleeping with anyone in our bed. That's our space, and it's off limits. Second, I don't want to hear about it. I don't need the details. And third, I paused, letting the tension hang in the air. Don't expect me to sit at home while you're out living your life. If we're doing this, I'm going to have my fun too. She looked surprised, but then she nodded, accepting my conditions. Fair enough. Little did she know, the game had already begun, and I was going to win. Over the next few days, things were eerily normal between Olivia and me. She seemed lighter, almost relieved, as if the weight of her secret desires had been lifted now that we'd come to some sort of agreement. I played along, outwardly calm, as though I had accepted this new reality. But inside, my mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Every time she smiled at me, touched my hand, or kissed me goodnight, I couldn't help but wonder how soon she'd be with someone else, and what that would feel like. But beneath the surface, my plan was already taking shape. Emily, her younger sister, had always been a temptation I kept at bay. She was stunning, dark-haired, with piercing green eyes and a laugh that could light up a room. Unlike Olivia, who had become more conservative and settled into the routine of marriage, Emily had always maintained her free-spirited, flirty demeanor. There had been moments in the past when her playful teasing had crossed lines, and I could tell she enjoyed making me uncomfortable. Now, I had no reason to hold back. The next Saturday, Olivia left early, saying she had plans with some new friends from her book club. Book club, my ass. I knew what she was up to, but I wasn't going to let her have all the fun. As soon as she pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my phone and sent a text to Emily. Me. Hey, you around today? Thought we could catch up. A few minutes passed, and then my phone buzzed. Emily. Sure. What's the occasion? Olivia told me she's out, so I figured you'd be busy. Me. Just wanted to hang out. Olivia and I have some new things going on. Thought I could use someone to talk to. The response came quickly this time. Emily. Ooh, mysterious. I'm intrigued. Come over in an hour. Perfect. I showered, threw on a casual shirt and jeans, and headed over to her place, my mind racing with how this might go down. I wasn't naive enough to think it would be easy. Emily might be flirtatious, but she was still Olivia's sister. But if she was anything like Olivia, curious and restless, I could push this in the direction I wanted. When I pulled up to Emily's house, she was already outside, sitting on her porch with a glass of wine, her legs crossed provocatively. She waved as I got out of the car, her eyes bright with curiosity. She was wearing a casual sundress, but the way it hugged her body left little to the imagination. Hey you, she called out as I approached. What's all this about? I smiled, trying to play it cool. Just needed someone to talk to. You know how it is with Olivia sometimes. Emily raised an eyebrow. Oh, trouble in paradise. I shrugged, sitting down next to her on the porch. Not exactly. Just changes. She brought up some things I wasn't expecting, and now everything feels different. She handed me her glass of wine, her fingers brushing mine for a second too long. Tell me more, she said, her voice low and inviting. I took a sip, feeling the warmth of the alcohol mingle with the adrenaline that was already coursing through me. She wants an open marriage, I said, watching her reaction closely. Emily's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. No way. Olivia? Miss Goody Two-Shoes wants to open up the marriage? That's wow. I did not see that coming. Neither did I admitted, handing her back the glass. But she's serious. So now, I'm just trying to figure out how to deal with it. Emily leaned back, studying me. And how do you feel about that? I shrugged again, playing the part of the conflicted husband. Honestly, I'm not sure. Part of me is angry, but another part of me is curious. I mean, if she's going to do it, why shouldn't I? She laughed, a soft, almost seductive sound. Well, look at you, Jason. Never thought I'd hear you talk like that. I always thought you were the loyal, one-woman type. I smiled, letting my eyes linger on her. Maybe I am. Or maybe I just haven't had the right opportunities. Emily held my gaze, something flickering behind her eyes. There was a moment of silence, the kind that hums with unspoken tension. She swirled her wine, took a slow sip, and then leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. So, What exactly do you have in mind, Jason? It was an invitation, subtle but unmistakable. This was the moment where things could either spiral into something I couldn't control, or I could walk away and keep my dignity intact. But I wasn't walking away. Not this time. I moved closer, just enough to let her know that I was serious. I think you already know, I said softly, my eyes locked on hers. Emily's lips curved into a knowing smile, and she set her wine glass down on the table beside her. You're playing a dangerous game, Jason. Maybe, I replied, my heart pounding. But I'm not the only one. Without another word, Emily closed the distance between us, her lips brushing against mine. It was tentative at first, a testing of boundaries, but when I didn't pull away, she kissed me harder, her hands sliding up to the back of my neck. The warmth of her body, the taste of wine on her lips, it was intoxicating. As the kiss deepened, I could feel the years of tension between us unraveling, the flirtations and near misses finally coming to a head. I wasn't thinking about Olivia anymore. I wasn't thinking about anything except the heat of Emily's breath on my skin, the way her hands gripped me like she had been waiting for this as long as I had. We pulled apart just long enough for her to murmur, "Are you sure about this?" In response, I kissed her again, my hands roaming over her body, feeling the soft fabric of her dress as I pulled her closer. She let out a soft moan, her fingers tangling in my hair as the kiss grew more urgent, more desperate. There was no going back now. As we stumbled inside, I couldn't help but think that maybe this was what I needed all along. Not just to satisfy some primal urge, but to take control of a situation that had felt so out of my hands. If Olivia wanted to play this game, fine, but I was going to win. We barely made it through the door before things escalated. Emily led me into her living room, her hands never leaving my body, and I felt a rush of adrenaline unlike anything I'd experienced in years. The guilt was there, a small voice whispering in the back of my mind that this was wrong, that I was betraying Olivia in the worst way possible. But I silenced it. After all, wasn't this what she wanted? She had opened the door by asking for an open marriage, and I was just stepping through it. Emily pushed me down onto the couch, straddling my lap, her breath hot against my neck. I could feel the tension in her body, the years of flirtation and teasing finally being released in a rush of passion. She kissed me hard, her hands slipping under my shirt, fingers trailing across my skin in a way that made me forget about everything else. There was no more hesitation, no more questioning. We were both caught up in the heat of the moment, and neither of us wanted to stop. As I ran my hands down her sides, feeling the curve of her hips beneath the thin fabric of her dress, I couldn't help but think about how ironic this all was. Olivia had set these wheels in motion, unknowingly pushing me right into the arms of her own sister. And here I was, doing the very thing she had feared might happen if we opened up our marriage. Only, I wasn't going outside our family. I was bringing the betrayal closer to home. But in that moment, I didn't care. I wasn't thinking about the consequences or the fallout that was bound to come. All I could focus on was Emily. The way she moved against me, the way her lips tasted like wine and temptation, the way her body seemed to fit perfectly against mine. It was wrong, but it felt so good that I didn't want it to end. God, Jason, Emily whispered against my ear, her breath ragged. I've wanted this for so long. I pulled back just enough to look at her, my hands gripping her hips tightly. You have no idea, I murmured, my voice thick with desire. She smiled, her eyes dark with the same hunger I felt. Then don't stop. We didn't stop. As we tore off our clothes, the room filled with the sounds of our frantic, breathless movements. There was no gentleness, no careful exploration. It was all raw, urgent need, years of tension being released in a single explosive moment. Her nails dug into my back as we tumbled together, bodies pressed so close it was hard to tell where I ended and she began. And in those minutes, nothing else mattered. Not Olivia, not the betrayal, not the looming consequences. It was just us, lost in the heat of something we both knew we shouldn't be doing, but unable to resist. Afterward, we lay tangled together on the couch, both of us breathing heavily, the room still thick with the scent of sex. Emily's head rested on my chest, her fingers lazily tracing patterns across my skin. The intensity of what had just happened slowly gave way to the reality of what we had done. "We're screwed, aren't we?" she finally said, her voice soft but tinged with amusement. I let out a breath, staring up at the ceiling, the weight of our actions starting to sink in. "Yeah, probably." She laughed lightly, propping herself up on one elbow to look at me. "Do you regret it?" I didn't answer right away. Did I regret it? A part of me knew that what we had just done would tear everything apart. My marriage, her relationship with Olivia, the entire family dynamic. But another part of me, the part still buzzing from the thrill of it all, couldn't bring itself to feel sorry. "Not yet, anyway." "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "Not yet." Emily smiled, leaning down to kiss me again, slow and lingering this time. "Good, because I don't either." We stayed like that for a while, caught in the afterglow of what we had just done. But reality couldn't be ignored for long. Eventually, I sat up, pulling on my clothes as Emily watched, still lounging on the couch, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. "What now?" she asked, her voice teasing, but with a hint of seriousness underneath. I paused, running a hand through my hair as I thought about the question. What now? I had no idea. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I had been so caught up in the moment, in getting back at Olivia in the most twisted way possible, that I hadn't considered what came next. "We keep this between us," I said finally, turning to face her. "Olivia can't find out." Emily raised an eyebrow, sitting up and pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "You think you can keep this a secret? You're playing with fire, Jason." "I know," I admitted, feeling the weight of my decision settling in. "But she doesn't need to know. This is our thing." For a moment, Emily just looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled again, that same mischievous glint returning to her eyes. "All right, our little secret." I wasn't sure if I believed her. Emily wasn't exactly the type to keep secrets, especially not one this big. But I didn't have a choice. If Olivia ever found out about this, it wouldn't just destroy our marriage. It would tear apart her entire family. The thought of that chaos, of the inevitable fallout, sent a shiver down my spine. As I left Emily's house and drove home, my mind raced with what I had just done. I wasn't sure how I was going to face Olivia later, knowing that I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But a strange sense of satisfaction lingered too. She had wanted an open marriage, and now she had won. The only problem was she had no idea just how open things had really become. When I got home, the house was quiet. Olivia still wasn't back. I sat down in the living room, staring at the clock as the minutes ticked by, my thoughts swirling in a whirlwind of guilt, anger, and twisted satisfaction. When Olivia finally came through the door later that night, she looked happy, almost glowing. She kissed me on the cheek and asked how my day was, as if everything were perfectly normal. I wondered if she had been with someone else, if she had already taken advantage of the new freedom she had asked for. But I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. We went to bed that night like nothing had changed, like we were still the same couple we had always been. But as I lay there next to her, staring up at the ceiling in the dark, I knew that everything had changed. Our marriage, our family, it was all hanging by a thread, and I had no idea when it would finally snap. One thing was certain, though. When it did, the fallout would be devastating. The days that followed were filled with a strange, tense silence between Olivia and me. We went through the motions, sharing meals, making small talk, going to bed at the same time. But there was a palpable distance between us now, something unspoken that hung in the air. I knew Olivia had sensed a shift, but whether it was guilt from her own actions or suspicion about mine, I couldn't be sure. I found myself checking my phone more often than usual, waiting for a message from Emily, but none came. After what had happened between us, I had expected her to reach out, maybe to test the waters and see where things stood. But there was nothing, just an unsettling quiet that made me wonder if she regretted what we had done. Or worse, if she was thinking about telling Olivia. That paranoia gnawed at me. Every time Olivia's phone buzzed or she laughed at a message, I imagined the worst. What if Emily had said something? What if, during some sisterly chat, she let it slip, or worse, confessed everything? I knew how fragile things were now, how close we were to everything imploding, and I hated feeling so out of control. But the days passed without incident. Olivia seemed content, almost too content, as if her idea of an open marriage had finally given her the thrill she'd been craving. Part of me wanted to ask her about it, to find out who she had been with, and if it had been worth it. But another part, a darker part, didn't want to know. I didn't want to compare myself to whoever she had been with. Didn't want the image of her in someone else's arms lingering in my mind. I had enough demons to deal with. By the time the weekend rolled around again, the weight of everything had become suffocating. Olivia suggested we have dinner with her family, a casual get-together at her parents' house. Normally, I would have brushed it off as a routine obligation. But now, with Emily involved, the idea of seeing her again after what had happened between us was enough to make me sweat. Still, I couldn't say no without raising suspicion, so I agreed. The drive over to Olivia's parents' house felt longer than usual. Every mile a reminder of the looming confrontation I hadn't fully prepared for. Olivia was chatty, talking about her week and what she had planned for the upcoming days. I nodded along, barely listening, my mind too preoccupied with how I would face Emily. When we arrived, her family was already gathered around the kitchen, her parents cooking while the rest mingled with drinks in hand. It was a normal, cozy family scene, the kind that should have felt familiar, comforting even. But the second I saw Emily standing by the counter, laughing with one of her cousins, my stomach tightened into knots. She looked radiant, more carefree than I'd ever seen her, as if what had happened between us was nothing more than a fleeting memory. When our eyes met across the room, she didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge the tension I felt. Instead, she gave me a subtle, knowing smile, the kind that sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't tell if she was toying with me or genuinely unfazed, but her composure made me feel like I was unraveling. The evening dragged on, the small talk and laughter around the dinner table clashing with the storm of thoughts in my head. I kept waiting for Emily to slip up, to make some veiled comment that would set Olivia's alarm bells off. But she was masterful, playing the role of the carefree sister perfectly. If anyone in the room had any inkling of what had happened between us, they didn't show it. After dinner, Olivia and her mother stepped outside to discuss some family plans, leaving me alone with Emily for the first time that night. I watched her from the corner of my eye as she helped clear the dishes, moving around the kitchen with an ease that only deepened my anxiety. I knew I needed to talk to her, to figure out where we stood, but I didn't know how to approach it without drawing suspicion. Finally, when we were alone by the sink, I took a deep breath and leaned in, keeping my voice low. "We need to talk." Emily didn't look up from the plate she was scrubbing, her tone casual. "About what?" "About what happened," I said, my voice more urgent than I intended. She glanced at me then, her lips curling into a smirk. "What happened, Jason? You're going to have to be more specific." I clenched my jaw, my frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "You know what I'm talking about. We can't just ignore it." She finally set the dish down and turned to face me, her expression amused. "Why can't we? You wanted it as much as I did. No one got hurt, right?" Her nonchalance only made my nerves worse. "That's not the point. What if Olivia finds out?" Emily shrugged, leaning against the counter with a wicked glint in her eyes. "She won't. Unless, of course, you're planning on telling her." The implication hung in the air, a twisted game of chicken that I wasn't prepared for. "This isn't a joke, Emily." "I know it's not," she replied, her voice softening slightly. "But you need to relax. Olivia's got her own secrets, trust me. She's not exactly innocent in all this." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "What do you mean?" Emily's smirk returned, more dangerous this time. "Let's just say, you're not the only one playing outside the lines. Olivia's been exploring too." I felt a knot form in my chest, a mixture of anger and betrayal boiling inside me. I had assumed as much, but hearing it from Emily made it real in a way that I wasn't ready to confront. Was this what Olivia wanted all along? To tear everything apart, to push us both to the edge until there was nothing left to salvage? Emily must have seen the conflict in my expression because she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Look, Jason, whatever Olivia's doing, it's her choice. You don't owe her anything. We're all playing this game, and we all know the rules. I shook my head, stepping back, my mind racing. I didn't sign up for this. She laughed softly, reaching out to touch my arm, her fingers light but electric. Sure you did. The second you kissed me, you did. Her words hit me hard, the truth of them sinking in deeper than I wanted to admit. She was right. I had crossed the line willingly, knowing exactly what I was getting into. Now, there was no turning back. I made my choice, and so had Olivia. The only question left was how far we were both willing to take it before everything shattered. Before I could respond, Olivia's voice called from the doorway, breaking the tension. "Jason, you ready to head home?" I turned, forcing a smile. "Yeah, sure. Let's go." As we left, Emily gave me one last glance, her smile tinged with a dangerous playfulness. I didn't know what her endgame was, but I knew I was in deeper than I had ever imagined. And as I drove home with Olivia beside me, acting as if everything was perfectly normal, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The game was far from over, and the stakes were only getting higher. The fallout, when it came, was going to be devastating. The tension was unbearable. Every day that passed felt like I was balancing on the edge of a razor, teetering between keeping the truth buried and the inevitable explosion that would tear everything apart. Emily's words kept replaying in my mind. "You don't owe her anything. We're all playing this game, and we all know the rules." But I didn't know the rules anymore. This whole situation was spiraling into something darker, something far beyond what I had imagined when Olivia first suggested an open marriage. Olivia, on the other hand, seemed happier. It was subtle at first, little things like humming while she cooked, a smile that lingered longer than usual, or the way she'd sit next to me on the couch, playfully leaning against me. It was almost like she had found some sort of peace in all of this. And maybe she had. Maybe opening the door to other men was exactly what she needed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that her newfound contentment was built on lies, my lies and hers. One evening, after another awkward dinner at home, I couldn't take it anymore. Olivia had excused herself to the bedroom, probably to relax after a long day. She didn't even say goodnight, just drifted off like we were roommates instead of husband and wife. I sat in the living room, staring at the muted television, my mind racing. I needed answers, and the only person who could give me those answers was Emily. I grabbed my phone, hesitating for a moment, and then typed a message. "Me, we need to talk. Can I come over?" I watched the screen for a few agonizing seconds before her reply came. "Emily, sure. Come by in an hour." There it was, the open invitation, a doorway back into the chaos. Part of me wanted to turn the car around and forget the whole thing, to shut it all down before I made things even worse. But another part, the part that had driven me into Emily's arms in the first place, couldn't let it go. I needed to know what Olivia had been up to, needed to understand how deep the betrayal went. I arrived at Emily's place just after 9. The porch light was on, and her door was slightly ajar, as if she had been expecting me. When I walked in, she was already waiting in the living room, curled up on the couch with a glass of red wine in hand. She looked relaxed, like nothing in the world could rattle her. Meanwhile, my stomach was in knots. "Jason," she greeted me with a teasing smile, motioning to the bottle of wine on the coffee table. "Help yourself." I ignored the offer, standing by the edge of the couch, unsure how to start. "I need to know the truth," I said, cutting straight to the point. Emily raised an eyebrow, swirling the wine in her glass. About Olivia," I replied, feeling the words catch in my throat. "You said she's been exploring, that she's not innocent in this." "What did you mean?" Emily sighed dramatically, setting her glass down. "Look, Jason, this whole thing is complicated. Olivia's always been the good girl, the perfect wife. But even she has her breaking point." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just tell me what's going on." She leaned back, crossing her legs as if she were enjoying this far too much. "Fine. Olivia's been seeing someone. For a while now. Actually," the room seemed to spin for a moment, her words hitting me like a punch to the gut. "Seeing someone?" I had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed felt like a sledgehammer to the chest. "Who?" I managed to ask, my voice hoarse. Emily shrugged, clearly unfazed by my reaction. Some guy from her book club. Well, that's what she told me anyway. They've been meeting up on the weekends, and from what she said, it's more than just coffee and conversation. My stomach twisted. Olivia, the woman who had shared my bed for decades, was meeting up with some other guy, doing God knows what while I sat at home like a fool. The anger bubbled up inside me, mixing with the guilt from my own infidelity, turning into something toxic. Does she know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Know what? Emily replied, though from her tone, it was clear she already knew what I meant. About us, I said, meeting her gaze. A sly smile spread across Emily's lips. No, she has no idea. But honestly, Jason, if she did find out, do you think it would matter? You're both doing your own thing now. I wanted to argue, to tell her that it would matter, that this wasn't some twisted game we could play without consequences. But the truth was, I didn't know anymore. My marriage felt like a shell of what it once was, a fragile facade covering a tangled mess of deceit and broken trust. And as much as I wanted to blame Olivia, I knew I was just as guilty. Emily stood up, walking over to me, her hand sliding up my chest as she leaned in close. You don't have to feel bad about this, she whispered, her lips brushing my ear. We're all just doing what we need to survive. You wanted out of that perfect little box Olivia put you in, didn't you? Her words were like poison, seeping into my thoughts, twisting them into something unrecognizable. I had wanted out, hadn't I? The monotony of marriage, the routine that had become suffocating. It was Olivia who had opened the door, but I had been the one to step through it, willingly. Emily's hands slid down to my waist, her body pressed against mine. And for a moment, I considered letting it happen again, letting the passion, the anger, the betrayal take over and drown out everything else. But something stopped me. A sliver of guilt, of shame, wormed its way into my mind. I stepped back, breaking her hold on me. I can't do this again, I muttered, my voice shaking. Emily looked surprised for a moment. Then she laughed softly, shaking her head. You're in too deep, Jason. You think you can just walk away now? I don't know, I admitted, rubbing a hand across my face. But I have to try. Emily watched me, her eyes narrowing slightly. Suit yourself, she said, her tone cold now. But just remember, you're not the only one with secrets. And Olivia, well, let's just say she's not as innocent as you think. I turned and left without another word, the weight of her parting comment settling heavy on my shoulders. As I drove home, the reality of everything hit me all over again. My marriage was falling apart, and I had no idea how to fix it. Worse, I wasn't even sure I wanted to. When I got home, the house was dark, and Olivia was already in bed. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a long moment, watching her sleep, her face peaceful, as if nothing in the world was wrong. How could she lie there so calmly, knowing what she had done? Knowing what I had done? I crawled in a bed beside her, the silence between us deafening. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me, the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. And I knew that no matter what happened next, there was no going back to the way things were. The next morning, Olivia was up early, moving through the house like it was any other day. She smiled at me as I came into the kitchen, offering me a cup of coffee. Good morning, she said brightly, as if everything was fine. I stared at her, wondering how she could pretend like nothing was wrong, like our marriage hadn't become a battlefield of secrets. Olivia, I began, my voice catching. She looked up at me, her smile fading slightly. What is it? I opened my mouth to say something, to confront her about everything I knew. But the words wouldn't come. I wasn't ready, not yet. Maybe I was still afraid of what would happen if I pulled that thread and everything unraveled. Nothing, I said finally, forcing a smile. It's nothing. But I knew it wasn't nothing. It was everything. And sooner or later, it was all going to come crashing down. Days passed, but the weight of everything that had happened hung over me like a dark cloud, growing heavier with every secret Olivia and I kept from each other. Our conversations became shorter, more superficial. We avoided the hard topics, dancing around the growing chasm in our marriage, both of us knowing that eventually the truth would demand to be acknowledged. But for now, we continued the charade. Olivia was thriving in this new life she had carved out for herself. She'd become more social, always going out with her book club, or having weekend plans that didn't include me. I try not to think about who she was really seeing during those outings, but it gnawed at me. Even though I'd already crossed lines with Emily, the thought of Olivia doing the same with another man still sent a jolt of anger through me. And beneath that anger, there was something else, a gnawing sense of guilt that wouldn't go away. Emily's words echoed in my mind, over and over. You're not the only one with secrets. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Olivia's behavior than she was letting on. And the worst part was, I didn't know if I wanted to find out. That Friday, Olivia casually mentioned she was going out of town for the weekend. It's a girls' trip, she explained over dinner, her tone light, as if she were simply sharing her plans for the weekend like she always did. We're going up to the lake, just a little getaway to relax and recharge. I nodded, barely looking up from my plate. Sounds nice. She smiled, but there was something in her eyes, something that made my gut twist with suspicion. Was this really a girls' trip, or was it something else? Was she going away with him, the man from her book club, or whoever she'd been seeing behind my back? I wanted to ask, but I didn't. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Olivia packed that night, cheerful and humming to herself as she tossed clothes into her suitcase. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching her, trying to summon the courage to say something. But every time I opened my mouth, the words died before they reached my lips. Instead, I let her go without a fight, kissing her goodbye the next morning as she left for her so-called girls' weekend. Once the door clicked shut behind her, the silence in the house was suffocating. I stood in the living room, staring out the window as her car disappeared down the street, 1,000 thoughts racing through my mind. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. The lies, the deceit, it was all too much. Something had to give. I sat down, my phone in hand, and opened Emily's contact. I had told myself I wouldn't see her again, that what had happened between us was a mistake I couldn't afford to repeat. But now, with Olivia gone, the temptation was stronger than ever. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen, before finally typing out a message. Me, can we talk? I didn't expect a reply so quickly, but within seconds my phone buzzed. Emily, sure, come over. There it was, the invitation I'd been dreading and craving at the same time. Before I could second-guess myself, I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, driving to Emily's place with my heart pounding in my chest. Every mile that brought me closer to her only made the guilt churn deeper, but I couldn't stop. It was like watching a car crash unfold in slow motion, knowing the impact was coming, but being unable to steer away from it. When I arrived, Emily greeted me at the door with a smile that sent a wave of conflicting emotions through me. Desire, guilt, anger, and something darker. She looked too calm, too composed, like she knew exactly what I was feeling and had been waiting for me to break. Hey, stranger, she said, stepping aside to let me in. Didn't think I'd hear from you so soon. I walked inside, the air between us thick with the tension of everything we weren't saying. I shouldn't be here, I said quietly, but the words lacked conviction. Even as I said them, I knew I wasn't leaving. Emily closed the door behind me and shrugged, her eyes gleaming with mischief. But you are. So what's going on? Trouble in paradise again. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the room. Olivia's away for the weekend. Some trip with her friends. I paused, looking at her. Or so she says. Emily crossed her arms, leaning against the wall, watching me with that knowing look. You think she's with someone else? I stopped pacing, the question hanging between us. I wanted to say no, wanted to believe that Olivia wasn't capable of the same betrayal I had committed. But deep down, I knew better. After all, she was the one who had started all of this. Maybe she'd wanted it all along, an excuse to be with someone else. I don't know, I muttered, sinking onto the couch. I don't know anything anymore. Emily walked over, sitting down beside me, her presence both comforting and dangerous. You're torturing yourself over this, she said softly, her hand resting on my knee. But maybe it's time to let go, Jason. Maybe you need to stop worrying about what Olivia's doing and start thinking about what you want. I looked at her, the weight of her words settling in. What did I want? I didn't even know anymore. My marriage had become a tangled mess of lies and half-truths, and I couldn't see a way out. But being here with Emily, it felt like an escape from the confusion, the guilt, the endless questions. Her hand slid up my leg, her touch igniting the desire I had been trying to suppress. "You don't have to keep pretending," she whispered, leaning closer. "We're both in this now. Why fight it?" I closed my eyes, the conflict raging inside me. I knew I shouldn't do this again. I knew it would only make everything worse. But at that moment, all I wanted was to forget, to drown in the heat of Emily's touch and push away the guilt that had been suffocating me for weeks. Before I could stop myself, I leaned in, my lips capturing hers in a desperate, hungry kiss. It was the same as before, intense, raw, a release of everything I had been holding back. Her hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and for a moment, nothing else mattered. But as we moved together, my mind couldn't help but drift back to Olivia, to the thought of her with someone else, doing exactly what I was doing now. The image twisted inside me, turning the passion into something darker, something fueled by anger and betrayal. It wasn't just about desire anymore. It was about getting even. It was about winning a game I hadn't asked to play, but had found myself trapped in nonetheless. Afterward, as we lay tangled in the sheets, the silence between us felt heavier than before. Emily rested her head on my chest, tracing lazy circles on my skin, but I couldn't relax. My thoughts were still a storm of confusion and guilt, swirling faster now that I had crossed the line again. "You're quiet," Emily murmured, her voice soft in the dim light. "I'm just processing," I replied, staring up at the ceiling. She propped herself up on one elbow, her eyes searching mine. "You're thinking about her, aren't you?" I didn't answer, but she didn't need me to. She already knew. Emily sighed, rolling away from me and sitting up. "Jason, you can't keep doing this back and forth. You're either in or you're out. But you can't have it both ways." "I know," I muttered, sitting up as well. "I know." The thing was, I didn't know. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to face Olivia and pretend like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. And I didn't know if I could keep up this twisted game with Emily without everything falling apart. "I need time," I finally said, running a hand through my hair. Emily looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Time won't fix this, Jason. You need to make a decision." I didn't have an answer for her. So instead of responding, I got dressed and left, the weight of my choices pressing down on me with every step I took. When I got home, the house was still empty. Olivia wouldn't be back until Sunday, and the silence in the house was deafening. I sat on the couch, staring at the door, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. There was no revelation, no sudden clarity. Just the same old questions, the same old doubts. I knew Emily was right. Sooner or later, I would have to choose. But no matter what I chose, someone was going to get hurt. And this time, it might just be everyone. That night, I barely slept. The silence of the house pressed in on me, amplifying every thought, every regret, until it felt like I was suffocating. The weight of what I'd done with Emily, the second time now, made the air feel heavy, like it was poisoned with secrets. And Olivia was still out there, somewhere, probably with another man, indulging in her own escape. I spent the next day alone, trying to distract myself. I worked in the yard, watched TV, tried anything to keep my mind off what was happening. But nothing worked. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Olivia with someone else. Every time I stopped moving, my mind drifted back to Emily and the tangle of emotions that came with her. It was as if my life had become a revolving door of guilt and betrayal, and I was trapped inside. By Sunday afternoon, I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, when I heard Olivia's car pull into the driveway. My stomach twisted as I watched her walk in through the front door, a bright smile on her face, carrying a small bag from her weekend away. She looked so normal, like nothing had changed, like she wasn't coming back from an affair. "Hey," she greeted me cheerfully, setting her bag down. "How was your weekend?" I forced a smile, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. "It was fine. Quiet." Olivia walked over, kissed me on the cheek, and sat down next to me on the couch, her mood light and carefree. "It was great at the lake," she said, her voice full of energy. "So relaxing. You should have come with us. Next time, maybe." The casualness of her words made my jaw clench. How could she be so calm, so unaffected? Did she really think I didn't know what was going on? I was sure of it now. This wasn't just a girl's trip. She'd been with him, whoever he was. "That's good," I said, my voice tight. "Glad you had a good time." She glanced at me, her smile faltering slightly. "You sure you're okay? You seem a little off." Off? The word echoed in my mind, twisting my anger into something sharper. I was more than off. I was falling apart. But I couldn't tell her that, not without pulling the thread that would unravel everything. "I'm fine," I replied, standing up abruptly. "I just need some air." I could feel her watching me as I walked out the door, but I didn't stop. The pressure in my chest was too much to contain. I needed space, time to think about what I was going to do, because I couldn't keep pretending. Not anymore. Outside, the cool evening air did little to calm the storm inside me. I leaned against the porch railing, staring out at the darkening sky, my thoughts racing. Emily was right. I couldn't keep going back and forth. I had to make a decision. But the problem was, no matter which way I looked at it, I didn't see a way out. If I told Olivia the truth about Emily, it would destroy her. She'd never forgive me, and our marriage would be over. But even if I kept it hidden, our relationship was already falling apart. Olivia was lying to me, sneaking off with another man, and I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. The thought of confronting her about it made my head spin. How would she react? Would she confess? Or would she deny everything and turn the blame on me? Either way, our marriage was crumbling, and I didn't know how to stop it. As I stood there, wrestling with my thoughts, the door creaked open behind me. Olivia stepped out onto the porch, her face concerned. "Jason, what's going on?" she asked, her voice soft. "You've been acting weird all day." I didn't answer right away, staring out into the dark, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment where everything could come crashing down. I could confront her, tell her I knew she was lying. Or I could let it go, continue pretending like nothing had changed. "I don't know, Olivia," I finally said, my voice low. "Maybe things aren't as fine as we pretend they are." There was a long pause, and I could feel her tense up beside me. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice cautious. I turned to face her, searching her eyes for any trace of the woman I used to know, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with. But all I saw was the distance that had grown between us, the secrets that had built walls we couldn't climb over. I hesitated, the words sticking in my throat. This open marriage thing, it's not working." Her expression faltered, a flash of guilt crossing her face, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "I thought we agreed this was what we both needed," she said carefully, watching me. "That it would give us space to explore." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet night. "Space? Is that what we're calling it now?" Olivia's brow furrowed, confusion and something else, fear maybe, clouding her eyes. "Jason, what are you talking about? You agreed to this. You said you were okay with it." "I thought I was," I admitted, my voice shaking. "But I'm not. Not anymore." She took a step closer, her hand reaching out to touch mine, but I pulled away. "Jason, what's going on? Did something happen?" I stared at her, my anger bubbling up again. "Why don't you tell me, Olivia? Where did you really go this weekend?" Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw the panic in her face. But she quickly masked it, her expression turning defensive. "I told you, I was at the lake with the girls. And I'm supposed to believe that?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You really think I don't know what's going on? That I'm just sitting here, blind to everything?" "Jason," she started, her voice softening, but I cut her off. "Don't lie to me, Olivia. Just tell me the truth. Is there someone else?" Her lips parted, and for a moment, she looked like she was going to deny it. But then her shoulders sagged, and she let out a shaky breath. I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and heavy. I felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under me, even though I'd known it all along. Hearing her admit it made it real in a way that I wasn't ready for. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, as if bracing herself. A few months, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't plan for this to happen, Jason. I swear. I felt so lost. We were so distant, and I thought this would help. I thought maybe I could find something, but I never wanted to hurt you. I stared at her, my mind reeling. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. This was the woman I had built my life with, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, and she had been lying to me for months. You didn't want to hurt me? I repeated, my voice cold. But you did. You destroyed everything. Tears filled her eyes, and she reached for me again, but I stepped back, shaking my head. Jason, please, she begged. We can fix this. We can work through it. I laughed again, a bitter, broken sound. Work through it? How? You've been lying to me for months. I can't even look at you without wondering where you've been, who you've been with. How are we supposed to fix that? She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned and walked back into the house, leaving her standing alone on the porch, the weight of her betrayal hanging heavy between us. Inside, I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking. Everything felt like it was crumbling around me, and I didn't know how to hold it all together. Olivia's confession had torn open the wound that had been festering for weeks, and now there was no going back. I had wanted the truth, and now I had it. But it didn't make me feel any better. It didn't change the fact that I had betrayed her too, that I had crossed lines with Emily that couldn't be uncrossed. The truth was, our marriage wasn't just broken. It was shattered, and no matter what we did, there was no putting the pieces back together. The only question left was whether we'd survive the fallout. The truth had been spoken, and now it sat between us like a living, breathing thing, a painful reminder of everything that had been destroyed. Olivia didn't follow me inside right away, but when she did, the tension in the room was palpable. She hovered near the doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen her, as if the weight of her confession had stripped her of her usual confidence. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, my thoughts racing but going nowhere. The betrayal burned hot in my chest, but beneath that anger, there was exhaustion. Pure, unrelenting exhaustion from months of pretending everything was fine, of trying to play a game neither of us understood. Jason, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please talk to me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. What was left to say? She'd already admitted everything. The marriage we once had was over, shattered by lies, deceit, and betrayal on both sides. And now, as we stood in the wreckage, I didn't know where to begin picking up the pieces. Olivia slowly walked toward me, stopping just a few feet away, her eyes red with unshed tears. I know I hurt you, she said softly, her voice trembling. I know I made a terrible mistake, but I don't want this to be the end. I don't want to lose you. Her words hit me, but they didn't carry the weight they once would have. There had been a time when I would have done anything to hold on to her, to fight for our marriage. But now, after everything, after what I had done with Emily, after the lies Olivia had told, it felt like we were too far gone. I finally looked up at her, the woman I had once thought I would spend the rest of my life with. And all I felt was an overwhelming sadness, a deep ache that came from knowing that we were no longer the people we used to be. We had both changed, both drifted so far apart that I wasn't sure we could ever find our way back. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said quietly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She flinched, her face crumbling as she wiped away a tear. I'm still me, Jason. I'm still the woman you married. I shook my head, standing up, my emotions finally spilling over. No, you're not. The woman I married wouldn't have done this. The woman I married wouldn't have lied to me for months. You've been with someone else, Olivia. You've been hiding it from me, sneaking around behind my back. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? Her tears flowed freely now, her hands trembling as she reached for me. I know I messed up. I know it's my fault. But I swear, Jason, I was lost. We were so disconnected, and I didn't know how to fix it. I was scared that we were falling apart. Well, we are falling apart. I snapped, the anger finally bubbling over. Do you think this was going to fix anything? Do Do you think screwing some guy from your book club was the solution? She recoiled as if I'd struck her, her tears turning into sobs as she collapsed onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. I didn't mean for it to get this bad, she cried. I didn't know what to do. Her sobs filled the room, but I couldn't find it in me to comfort her. I wanted to take her in my arms and tell her we could fix this, that we could find a way to put everything behind us. But I couldn't lie to her, or to myself. We were broken, and no amount of apologies or explanations was going to change that. I sat back down, staring at the wall as the weight of everything crashed down around me. The silence between her sobs was deafening. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I felt completely alone, even with her right there beside me. After what felt like an eternity, Olivia finally lifted her head, wiping her tear-streaked face with the back of her hand. Her voice was shaky, but there was a desperation in her words. "Jason, please. I don't want this to be over. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll end things with him. I'll never see him again, I swear. Just please, don't walk away from us." I turned to face her, the raw vulnerability in her eyes cutting deep, but it didn't reach me the way it once would have. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that this was something we could fix if we just tried hard enough. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I had the strength to try anymore. And even if I did, I wasn't sure I wanted to, because I had my own secrets that were just as damaging, just as unforgivable. Emily. Her name was like a thorn in my mind, a constant reminder of my own betrayal. How could I sit here and condemn Olivia for what she had done when I had crossed lines too? How could I look her in the eye and tell her I was any better when I had been sleeping with her own sister? I don't know if we can come back from this, I finally said, my voice hollow. Too much has happened. She shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "No, Jason, please. We can work through this. We just need time. Time won't fix this," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I've been lying to you too." Olivia froze, her breath catching in her throat as she stared at me, her eyes wide with confusion. What are you talking about?" I swallowed hard, the words threatening to choke me as they clawed their way up. This was it, the moment I had been dreading, the moment where I would have to lay everything bare and watch it all come crashing down. "I've been with someone else too," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, her lips parting as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. What? What do you mean?" I could feel the guilt crushing me, the weight of my betrayal settling over me like a suffocating blanket. But I had to say it. I had to come clean, no matter how much it would hurt. "I've been sleeping with Emily." Her reaction was instant. She shot up from the bed, her face pale, her eyes wide with horror. "Emily," she whispered, her voice shaking. "My sister." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest, each beat louder than the last. "It wasn't planned. It just happened." Olivia stared at me, her face a mask of disbelief. For a moment, I thought she might scream, might hit me, might break down completely. But instead, she just stood there, frozen in place, her eyes locked on mine. When she finally spoke, her voice was eerily calm, but the hurt in her eyes was unmistakable. "How long?" I hesitated, the truth twisting in my gut. "A few weeks. After you asked for the open marriage." She took a step back, her hands trembling as she brought them to her mouth, as if trying to hold back a scream. You've been sleeping with my sister. My sister, Jason." "I'm sorry," I said, the words feeling hollow, inadequate. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just got out of control." Olivia shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes again. This is worse than I ever imagined," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I betrayed you, but this is beyond anything I ever thought you were capable of." "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "I know it was wrong. I know I hurt you." The silence that followed was suffocating, heavy with the weight of everything that had just been said. Olivia stared at me, tears streaming down her face, and I could see the realization settling in, that this was the end, that there was no coming back from this. She took a deep breath, her voice shaking as she spoke. "I don't know who we are anymore. I don't even know if we ever were the people we thought we were. I couldn't argue with her, because the truth was I didn't know either. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving me sitting on the edge of the bed, the enormity of my actions crashing down on me like a tidal wave. I listened as she gathered her things, heard the front door open and close behind her, the sound of her car pulling away, and then silence. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, I was completely and utterly alone. The sound of Olivia's car fading into the distance left an eerie quiet in the house. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the spot where she had stood just moments ago, the weight of everything pressing down on me. It was over. She was gone. And with her went the last fragile hope that we could somehow salvage the broken pieces of our marriage. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady my breathing, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I had expected anger, screaming, something dramatic when I told her about Emily. But her reaction, the calmness, the disbelief, the sheer devastation in her eyes, cut deeper than I'd anticipated. I could still see her face, pale and stunned, as she absorbed the truth. Her own sister. I couldn't shake the guilt that came crashing down on me now that she was gone. What had I done? This wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal on a level that tore through the very foundation of everything we'd built. I'd crossed a line that should never have been crossed, and now I had to live with that decision. I had destroyed the one person I'd sworn to love and protect. The silence in the house became unbearable, the walls closing in around me as if they were mocking my isolation. I couldn't stay here. Not now. Not in the place where everything had fallen apart. I grabbed my keys and headed out, not sure where I was going, just knowing that I needed to escape. I drove aimlessly for a while, the streets blurred by my thoughts. My phone buzzed several times, but I didn't bother checking it. I couldn't handle anything right now. Not Emily, not anyone. Eventually, I found myself pulling into a parking lot by the beach, the moon casting a pale glow over the dark water. The ocean had always been my go-to place when life felt overwhelming. Something about the vastness of it made me feel small, insignificant, as if my problems didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I got out of the car and walked down to the sand, the cool breeze tugging at my clothes. The waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, their steady hum almost soothing compared to the chaos in my head. I sat down, burying my hands in the sand, staring out at the horizon. I thought back to the beginning, before all of this, before the lies and the betrayal. There was a time when Olivia and I had been happy, when we'd laughed together, made plans for the future, and felt like nothing could tear us apart. We'd had the perfect life, or so I'd thought. But somewhere along the way, we lost each other. We got caught in the monotony of marriage, the grind of daily life, and slowly, without realizing it, we started drifting apart. Maybe it had been inevitable. Maybe we were always doomed to end up here, broken and shattered. Or maybe I'd let it happen. Maybe I'd been too focused on myself, too blind to see how disconnected we had become. And when she suggested the open marriage, instead of fighting for us, I'd taken the easy way out. I let her go, thinking I could explore something new too. But all I found was destruction. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket again, and this time I pulled it out. Emily's name flashed on the screen. The sight of it made my stomach turn. I hadn't told her about what had just happened, but she must have known something was wrong. I hesitated before answering, not sure if I could handle hearing her voice right now. But the phone kept buzzing, and eventually I swiped to pick up. Jason. Emily's voice came through the line, soft but tinged with concern. Where are you? I've been trying to reach you. I'm at the beach, I said, my voice flat. There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her calculating what to say next. Is everything okay? I let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow against the backdrop of the waves. No, Emily. Everything's not okay. What happened? She knows. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I couldn't help it. I told her about us. About you. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by a long silence. You told her? Emily's voice was shaky now, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. Yes, I told her. I repeated, feeling the anger flare up again. She knows everything. Jason, her voice cracked. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't. Neither did I. I snapped, cutting her off. But it did happen, didn't it? And now it's too late. We destroyed everything, Emily. I destroyed everything. She was silent, and for a moment, I thought she might have hung up. But then she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. What do we do now? I shook my head, staring out at the dark water. I don't know. Another long silence stretched between us, the weight of everything we'd done pressing down like a suffocating blanket. Finally, Emily spoke again, her voice small and uncertain. Do you hate me? I closed my eyes, feeling the sting of her question. Did I hate her? Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to blame her for everything that had gone wrong, to pin the weight of my guilt on her shoulders. But the truth was I couldn't. I had been just as complicit. I had made my own choices, and now I had to live with them. I don't hate you, I said quietly. But I don't know what this is anymore. I don't know what we're doing. I didn't mean for this to happen, she repeated, her voice thick with emotion. I never wanted to hurt Olivia. Or you. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. It's too late for that. We hurt her. We hurt everyone. Emily's breath hitched, and I could hear her struggling to hold back tears. I don't know how to fix this. Neither do I. We sat in silence for a few moments, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Eventually, I heard her sniffle, the sound breaking the quiet. What do you want to do, Jason? Do you want me to leave you alone? Do you want me out of your life? I didn't know how to answer that. The logical part of me knew that cutting ties with Emily might be the only way to move forward, to try and salvage whatever was left of my life. But the other part, the part that had been drawn to her in the first place, wasn't ready to let go. It was tangled in the mess we'd made, still holding on to the twisted connection we shared. I don't know, I admitted, the words feeling heavy in my mouth. I don't know what I want anymore. Emily didn't respond right away, and I could hear her struggling to keep her emotions in check. I'm sorry, Jason, she whispered. For everything. I didn't have the energy to respond. I sat there, staring at the waves, listening to the sound of her breathing on the other end of the line. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. None of this was supposed to happen. But now that it had, there was no going back. I'll give you space, Emily finally said, her voice thick with tears. Just let me know when you're ready to talk. And then she hung up. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, the phone still clutched in my hand. The beach was nearly empty now, the sound of the ocean the only thing keeping me grounded as my thoughts spiraled out of control. I had no idea what to do next. My marriage was in ruins. My relationship with Emily was a tangled mess of guilt and desire, and I didn't know if I could salvage any of it. The only thing I knew for sure was that nothing would ever be the same again, and that terrified me. Thank you for joining us for this touching journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. We hope it resonated with you, even brought a little inspiration. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reactions in the comments. Feel free to share your own experiences or let us know what kinds of stories you'd like to see next. Thanks again for your support. Until then, take care and stay tuned for more great content.